Okay, so I've had a lot of requests to do a walkthrough basically of a standard, to keep it growing and keep it showing, and then I can do little sort of updates on future videos. So that's what I'm going to do here. Now, this is a plant that I started cutting back earlier, and then I suddenly thought, well, I know what I can do in my video. I can actually encompass growing, taking a cutting of a standard. I have got one or two other cuttings there that I've already taken off, but I'm starting the cut back of this plant. Now, I'm not going to run through cutting back plants. I've got other videos that show that. Standards, showing a standard attempt is something that I've not done before. So we can go through this. Hopefully I'll take a couple so that if we lose one, we can see how it potentially goes on. So what the first thing you need to do is choose a plant that in general is probably a generous growing dwarf. If you're going to use something like a zonal type or a stellar type, this is a stellar variety. It's Robin Louise, it's one of my own, but it's what I would call a generous growing dwarf variety, because you want the head to be relatively compact. If you say used a basic zonal or even a big growing regal such as the one we've got there, the heads will get too big ideally. I mean, you can grow some monsters if you wish, but you really want a dwarf type plant. So this is exactly the type of plant that is ideal for growing as a standard. So that's what we're going to do. Now, what you need to do very basically is find a stem that is relatively straight, is going to sort of root relatively well. Now, there's two ways of looking at it. Either you can take a relatively normal cutting and train it to grow long, or you can try and get a longer cutting and continue to grow it, long. The only slight danger with that is if you've got something that's a bit long jointed, you may continue to sort of feed through that long jointedness. And you don't really want a head with lots of long jointed growth. But that's why we're going to choose a dwarf which to a certain extent, negates that issue. So we're going to try and find something relatively long, but not so long. I want obviously the cutting to be soft. I don't want it to be too hard a wood. So I'm just going to delve in here now and find something suitable. I'll probably do 2 or 3 cuttings so that hopefully one survives for a good length of time. Okay, so there we are. I've got 3 relatively good cuttings. I will snap off the blooms, but you can see that's probably a good one. There's a slightly shorter jointed one. If I just tilt down. There's a slightly shorter jointed one. There's a sort of medium jointed one, and there's a slightly longer jointed one. So we'll see how they go. But realistically, let's have a little look at that one. I'll do those other 2 sort of after the video, but so you can sort of see the length of the cutting material I've got here. Now this is taken from a flower joint. So there's the flower joint, and on a zonal you'll often find that the break is actually just a bit further down. So I'm taking that off there, and I'm going to cut the actual cutting underneath that node there. That would not be a flowering node because it's opposite, that would not be a stem node because it's opposite a flowering node. But that's more or less how I would want it to be. I'm going to snap off this bloom. Always put your thumb underneath where you're snapping so you don't bend the stem. But that I think will grow up quite nicely. I have just dropped the flower. I'll pick it up in a second. Just tidy that up. And that's the sort of thing that you're after. It's relatively long. And I'm going to take the cut just literally smack under the little node there, and there it is. I hope that's picking that up. Because it's so bright I can't actually see, but in the just a very brief tidy up. Now for zonals, I don't use any rooting hormone or anything like that. What I might do, there's quite a bit of leaf there because we're going quite high, so I'm going to take one of the leaves off. But I will probably put that in up to that sort of first leaf. You're always going to get a very slight bend on the top, but we can straighten that out. But that will grow out once we get our stick in there to support it, and that'll be tied in, and that will just straighten out these very slight buckles. So there we are, that's that one. I'll do the other two, and there's three that we'll push forward for growing on as standards, and we'll follow that procedure through. Right, so ordinary stem cuttings, again we might as well use an example on this Robin Louise. I can see a nice prime one here that's just waiting for me to sort of cut it off. Again, be very careful when using very sharp knives. This is a very good example of a nice cutting that you want somebody that's very stocky, short jointed, which means there's not a lot of gap between the sort of growth joints up through the stem. Take off some of the leaves so that it's not stressed too much. The key when taking cuttings is you're trying not to stress the little cutting too much before it's got any roots. And again, just literally just below a leaf joint. It's very easy. This one is a proper dual stem node joint. On there. Make sure, of course, that you've always got a very clean knife. That's always something very important. And that's ideal. You've got a twin break there that's coming up on that little short one. But they're very straightforward. I mean, okay, so what else was I going to do today? We're going to answer a couple of questions. I've had a couple of questions in on the video notices that you can enter. You can ask any questions on the bottom of the videos that I publish. So please do, if you've got any questions that I may miss, because obviously I had to bang through these quite quickly. So I sometimes may miss a bit, or miss a vital little bit of information that I sometimes might make up for at a later stage. But so I'm going to answer a couple of questions that I've had through on the videos. The first one was, how do I know when to water my plants? Well, that's quite an interesting question, actually. Now, in the summer, it's plants do dry out in a glass house very quickly. I mean, I'm actually sweating to death. I've just slipped a t-shirt on. I'm normally in here in not a great deal, to be quite honest, because it's very hot. But the temperature currently in here is around about 38 centigrade with everything vented. I've got the doors closed just to keep our cats out and things like that. But it does get very hot in here. Now pelargoniums, when it gets very hot in the summer, can switch off a little bit, so you do need to be a little bit careful. But outside, when you say got a big pot such as this, now this pot here, for instance, this could be like any pot that's outside. Now what I do, always water from the top. It's a big clay pot. You can't water from the bottom very easily. So what I do is just let the top dry, and then once it's dried, leave it about a day or two after that, and then just basically fill it in water. It's quite easy, just put water in it, let it drain through, and you'll see it dropping out the bottom, and that's it really. Now with my potted plants, with my smaller potted plants, basically, I mean, they're relatively easy to lift off. You know, it's not hard. I can just lift it up. If it's dry at the base, then they'll get a drink. I mean, you can sort of lift up, and you can obviously see that it's light. If the plant is light, then you know that it needs a drink. That one's not far off, actually. It needs a drink when it's dried out. But I let my pelargoniums dry out more or less completely between every watering. I mean, ideally, you want to get them before they're completely dried out, but so that's not possible. But pelargoniums like to dry out between waterings, but they're very good at surviving drought. I mean, the species, the majority of the species come from South Africa, where they were living in, you know, relatively, you know, very arid and dry areas, so that it's got in their genes that they can withstand a bit of drought. So, you know, don't be concerned that you may miss a water, but they'll basically just sort of hold up and stop growing really during that time. Now, I've already touched on some cuttings, but another question I had really was when can you take cuttings? Well, the best time realistically is in the late summer or early autumn. September, probably about the best time, maybe from late August onwards. Talking very much UK here, it's obviously very difficult. I know I get people viewing this channel from all around the world, so it's never easy to sort of give guidance to people from, you know, various parts of the world. But if you don't want to use bottom heat, say in a propagator, you need to be taking them really probably about late August, early September onwards, when the temperatures are, the days are just beginning to lengthen in the northern hemisphere anyway, and you can get away with not having any bottom heat. Now, I'm taking cuttings now primarily because it's the only chance I'm really going to get to have cutting material available. Zonals, no problem at all, because you take zonal cuttings realistically at any time because they produce a stem and a flower on one stem. The Regals and Angels, they produce a separate flowering stem. So as long as you're taking cutting material from the main growing stem, which isn't easy to find in the sort of, certainly the early to midsummer period on Regals and Angels, not easy to find. That's why in the later summer they start producing a bit more growth, normal growing material that's suitable for cuttings. But on a big plant such as the one I showed earlier, I could probably find a few cuttings on that. Not very many, but I could find a few. Whereas if I let that grow, maybe give it a flower trim, and if I let it grow basically into the autumn, that'll produce a lot of cutting material in the autumn. But if you don't want to supply bottom heat, really is late summer, maybe sort of late August, early September is the best time to take, when the days are just getting a bit cooler, but you've still got warm enough night temperatures to maintain a balance and provide your cuttings with good temperatures to be able to root. Because basically they need a sort of a minimum of 16 and say a maximum of about 25 degrees centigrade. That's the ideal temperatures for them. Okay, so that's all I've got time for today. I've really bashed through. I know there's a lot of information there. So remember, if you want to subscribe, click the button below. And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter as Mr. Pelargonium. So, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye for now.